For more than half a century, Dolly Parton has existed in a space few artists ever reach, where familiarity feels personal yet mystery still lingers, where laughter disarms scrutiny and songs carry truths deeper than interviews ever could, and where the public believes it knows her even as she continues to choose carefully what is revealed and what remains her own. She has been called a legend, a symbol, a contradiction, and a constant, moving through eras of cultural upheaval without losing her voice or her audience, shaping not only music but memory itself. And as time reshapes the world around her, the question is no longer how she became who she is, but how she understands the arc of what she has built, what it costs to carry a legacy this large, and what it means when a woman who has spent her life giving stories to others begins to decide how her own story should be carried forward. Because some truths are not announced at the beginning, they wait patiently at the end. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born in 1946 in a one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, the fourth of 12 children in a family that had little money but an abundance of music, where her father worked the land and her mother sang old ballads that had traveled across generations, and where survival depended as much on resilience as it did on cooperation. Poverty was not an abstract concept but a daily reality marked by hand-me-down clothes, shared beds, and the constant pressure to make do yet. Within that environment, Dolly found a sense of richness through sound, learning early that melodies could lift spirits and words could travel beyond the hills that seemed to fence her world in, and by the time she was a child she was already performing on local radio and television, writing songs that mirrored the life she knew while quietly imagining one she had yet to see, a duality that would later define her work. Deeply rooted in authenticity, yet always reaching outward. As Dolly's talent carried her beyond Tennessee, she made a conscious decision to design not only her music but her image, understanding instinctively that in an industry quick to stereotype women, control of presentation meant control of narrative, and so she crafted a look inspired by exaggerated femininity, humor and self-awareness, famously embracing wigs, makeup, and flamboyant fashion while disarming critics by being the first to joke about it. Beneath the rhinestones was a sharp strategist who knew that seeming approachable, even underestimated, created space to maneuver, and Dolly used that space to speak candidly about class, gender, and ambition without alienating audiences, turning her appearance into a kind of armor that protected her private self while allowing her public persona to sparkle, entertain, and endure. Dolly Parton's national breakthrough came when she joined Porter Wagoner's television show in the late 1960s, a partnership that introduced her to millions of viewers and positioned her as a rising star within country music. Yet the relationship was complex, shaped by mentorship, creative collaboration, and increasing tension as Dolly's songwriting and popularity grew, while Wagoner helped open doors. Dolly felt the limits of being framed as a supporting act, and her desire for independence eventually led to a painful but necessary separation, one immortalized in song and emblematic of a larger pattern in her life. Gratitude without submission, loyalty without silence, and courage to walk away even when comfort and security were on the line, a decision that would echo through her career and set the stage for everything that followed. Dolly Parton has always described herself first and foremost as a songwriter, and it is in the quiet discipline of writing that her greatest power reveals itself, because she approaches songs not as fleeting hits but as self-contained worlds with characters, tension, and emotional truth. Jolene emerged from a blend of real-life fragments, a bank teller's flirtation, a child's red-haired beauty, a feeling of vulnerability many women rarely admit, and was sharpened into a minimalist plea that felt timeless the moment it was recorded. While I Will Always Love You, written during a period of professional transition, demonstrated her rare ability to express separation without bitterness, gratitude without weakness, and love without possession, a combination so universal that it transcended genre and generation. These songs were not accidents but the result of an almost industrial work ethic, with Dolly often writing dozens of songs in short bursts, guided by instinct rather than calculation, trusting that clarity and emotional honesty would outlast trends. And over time her catalog became proof that simple language, when precisely chosen, can carry enormous emotional weight and travel farther than elaborate production ever could. Behind the warmth and humor that defined Dolly Parton's public image lies a disciplined business mind that understood early on the importance of ownership, particularly in an industry known for exploiting creative talent, and she made the crucial decision to retain publishing rights to her songs, a move that not only protected her creative control but ensured long-term financial independence. This foresight allowed her to navigate offers, collaborations, and licensing opportunities on her own terms, turning her catalog into a living asset that could adapt to new mediums without losing its core value. And as her fame grew, she expanded the Dolly brand carefully, aligning ventures with her values rather than chasing short-term profit, whether through music, live performance, or later enterprises connected to tourism and entertainment. What set her apart was not just intelligence but restraint, an understanding that saying no preserved leverage, and that longevity in show business depended as much on patience and principle as on popularity. Dolly Parton's transition into film and television was never about abandoning music but about extending her storytelling into new forms, and her performances revealed a natural screen presence built on timing, empathy, and self-awareness rather than formal acting training. roles in major films allowed her to play characters that echoed aspects of her own journey: resilient women navigating power, class, and independence, while her television appearances reinforced her accessibility and humor, making her feel less like a distant star and more like a familiar presence welcomed into living rooms. Crucially, Dolly avoided the trap of overexposure by choosing projects that complemented her image instead of diluting it, ensuring that her ventures on screen enhanced rather than distracted from her musical identity, and in doing so she demonstrated that reinvention did not require rejection of one's roots, only the confidence to let those roots grow in different directions. When Dolly Parton turned her attention back to the Smoky Mountains with the idea that would become Dollywood, it was not nostalgia driving the project but responsibility, because she had never forgotten the limitations she grew up with or how few opportunities existed for people who were talented but geographically trapped. Opening first as a partnership and later fully branded with her name, the park evolved into a major cultural and economic engine for East Tennessee, creating thousands of jobs and transforming tourism in Sevier County, while Dolly remained closely involved in shaping its tone and mission, insisting it reflect Appalachian history, craftsmanship, music and family values rather than becoming a hollow commercial attraction. Dollywood's success proved that regional pride could coexist with global appeal, and more importantly, it demonstrated Dolly's belief that success meant little if it did not circle back to lift the community that shaped you, a philosophy she practiced quietly and consistently rather than as a publicity strategy. Among all of Dolly Parton's achievements, the Imagination Library stands as perhaps the clearest expression of her long-term vision, born from her father's inability to read and her deep understanding of how early literacy shapes a child's entire future. Launched in the mid-1990s, the program began modestly by mailing free books to children in her home county, but it quickly expanded through partnerships to reach families across the United States and eventually multiple countries, delivering millions of books each month without regard for income, politics, or background. Dolly never framed the project as charity but as an investment, believing that giving children access to stories was a way to give them choice, confidence, and imagination, and she resisted attempts to personalize or monetize the initiative, keeping the focus on impact rather than credit, a rare stance in an era where philanthropy often doubles as branding. Over the course of her career, Dolly Parton accumulated an extraordinary number of awards, including multiple Grammy wins and lifetime honors that placed her among the most recognized artists in American music, yet she consistently treated accolades as affirmation rather than destination. Early recognition validated her songwriting at a time when female composers were frequently dismissed, while later honors acknowledged not just individual songs but the scope of her influence across genres, generations and mediums, and even as institutions celebrated her legacy, Dolly maintained a pragmatic distance from praise, often redirecting attention back to the work itself. The awards mattered not because they elevated her ego, but because they symbolized doors opening for others like her, especially women who wanted creative control and respect without sacrificing authenticity. Dolly Parton's collaborations reveal a pattern of generosity rather than competition, as she consistently used her platform to amplify other voices, whether through songwriting partnerships, duets, mentorship, or public support. She worked seamlessly with artists from country, pop, rock, and gospel backgrounds, adapting without losing herself. And she became known for encouraging younger performers while refusing to position herself as a gatekeeper. Many artists credit Dolly not only for opportunities but for modeling how to navigate fame with kindness and boundaries, showing that success did not require cruelty or exclusivity, and that lifting others did not diminish one's own light, a principle that quietly shaped her reputation as much as any hit record ever did. Dolly Parton's relationship with her fans has never followed the traditional distance of celebrity worship but instead resembles an unspoken contract built on trust, humor, and mutual respect, because she understands that admiration is sustained not by perfection but by consistency of spirit. From meet and greets to televised appearances, she has cultivated a tone of warmth that makes people feel seen rather than managed, often speaking directly to audiences as if continuing a conversation that began decades earlier, and this sense of familiarity has allowed fans to grow older alongside her without feeling abandoned or betrayed by change. Dolly never pretended fame was accidental, yet she refused to treat devotion as entitlement, drawing clear boundaries around her private life while offering sincerity in her public one. A balance that kept admiration from turning corrosive and preserved affection across generations who felt connected not to an illusion, but to a personality that never talked down to them. Despite living much of her life under relentless public attention, Dolly Parton has remained fiercely protective of her inner world, anchoring herself in family, long-standing relationships, and a personal faith that has guided her decisions without becoming performative. She has often spoken about the grounding influence of her upbringing and the importance of loyalty, crediting those values with keeping her steady amid fame's distortions. And while curiosity about her private life has never waned, Dolly has consistently redirected attention away from gossip and toward gratitude, humor, or work. This discretion is not secrecy born of shame but intentional privacy, a choice to keep certain joys and sorrows unshared so they could remain intact, and in doing so she demonstrated that openness and mystery can coexist, allowing the public to feel close without being intrusive. What appears effortless in Dolly Parton's output is in fact the result of strict personal discipline shaped by routine, intuition, and relentless curiosity, because she treats creativity not as a lightning strike but as a responsibility that demands daily attention. She has described writing songs as both instinctual and methodical, often working early in the morning when distractions are minimal, capturing ideas quickly before self-doubt can interfere, and revisiting them with a craftsman's eye for clarity and melody. Reinvention for Dolly has never meant abandoning her core identity but refining how it is expressed, whether through new sounds, collaborations, or platforms, and this commitment to evolution without erasure has allowed her to remain relevant without chasing trends, proving that longevity is earned through respect for the work itself rather than fear of being forgotten. Over the decades, Dolly Parton has faced criticism that ranged from dismissive to deeply misinformed, often centered on her appearance, intelligence, or refusal to conform to expectations placed on women in public life, yet her response was rarely confrontation and almost never defensiveness. Instead, she disarmed critics through humor, consistency, and an unwavering focus on results. Allowing time to correct narratives she knew argument would only inflame, and when controversy brushed against her values she addressed it calmly, refusing to escalate conflict for attention. These moments revealed a strategic patience rooted in self-knowledge, an understanding that being misunderstood was sometimes the cost of independence, and that clarity eventually emerges when actions align steadily with principle, even if recognition comes long after the noise has faded. As Dolly Parton moved further into her 70s, the conversation around health and aging shifted from speculation to transparency, not because she framed herself as fragile, but because she acknowledged reality with the same clarity she applied to every phase of her life, openly discussing how stamina, recovery time, and priorities had changed even as her creative drive remained intact. She spoke honestly about physical wear, vocal preservation, and the emotional weight of constant travel, explaining why large-scale touring no longer aligned with how she wanted to spend her time, especially after the loss of loved ones and the increasing value she placed on balance, rest, and reflection. And rather than presenting this as retreat, Dolly framed it as recalibration, choosing appearances, recordings, and projects that allowed her to remain present and excellent without being exhausted, demonstrating that slowing down was not surrender but strategy, a conscious decision to protect both her health and the quality of what she still wished to offer the world. Few artists have lived through as many industry revolutions as Dolly Parton, beginning in an era of radio dominance and vinyl records, moving through cassette tapes, CDs, digital downloads, and finally into the age of streaming and algorithm-driven discovery, yet she approached each shift with pragmatism rather than nostalgia. Instead of resisting change, Dolly adapted by understanding where values still lived in songwriting ownership, publishing, and cross-generational appeal, ensuring that her catalog remained relevant regardless of format, and by embracing collaborations, re-recordings, and placements that introduced her music to younger audiences, she avoided being frozen in time as a legacy act. Her navigation of the industry's upheaval reflected a broader truth about her career: that technology might change how music is delivered, but emotional honesty and smart ownership ensure it continues to endure. Dolly Parton's financial story is often summarized in headlines about wealth, but the more revealing narrative lies in how deliberately that wealth has been structured, protected, and deployed, because she has consistently treated money as a tool rather than a trophy. Through careful management of publishing rights, diversified business ventures, and long-term planning, she built an empire that allowed independence from external control, while supporting both personal freedom and large-scale generosity, and she has repeatedly emphasized that accumulation was never the end goal, often stating that having money only mattered if it enabled choice, security, and the ability to help others. Estate planning and business structures were designed not just to preserve assets but to ensure continuity of purpose, reinforcing the idea that her financial legacy would be defined less by numbers than by direction. What distinguishes Dolly Parton's philanthropy is not simply its scale but its structure, because she favors programs with measurable outcomes and long-term reach rather than one-time gestures, focusing on literacy, education, disaster relief, and community resilience. She approaches giving with the same discipline she applies to songwriting and business, asking whether an initiative truly solves a problem and whether it can sustain itself beyond her personal involvement, and she often avoids attaching her name too prominently, believing that impact matters more than applause. At the heart of her philosophy is a belief shaped by lived experience, that opportunity can alter destiny when delivered early and consistently, and that generosity, when practiced quietly and thoughtfully, creates ripples that extend far beyond the giver, shaping futures in ways that recognition never fully captures. Over time, Dolly Parton has moved beyond celebrity into the realm of cultural symbol, becoming a subject for artists, filmmakers, writers, and scholars who examine how she embodies contradictions that rarely coexist so comfortably: glamour and humility, commerce and generosity, tradition and reinvention. and academic discussions have framed her as a lens through which to understand Appalachian identity, gender performance, class mobility, and American popular culture, visual artists reference her exaggerated femininity as both satire and empowerment. Filmmakers use her music as shorthand for emotional truth and resilience, and scholars analyze her lyrics for narrative economy and moral clarity, all of which underscores how Dolly's influence extends far beyond entertainment into the way people talk about authenticity, self-authorship, and dignity, proving that her image is not static branding but a living text continually reinterpreted by each generation that encounters it. Dolly Parton has long understood that if you do not tell your own story, someone else will tell it for you, and likely get it wrong, which is why she has approached interviews, books, documentaries, and public statements with intentional care, revealing enough to feel honest while withholding what she believes should remain personal. Her memoirs and long-form conversations emphasize process over confession, focusing on how choices were made rather than dramatizing pain, and she uses humor as a narrative tool to disarm probing questions without appearing evasive, a strategy that allows her to shape public understanding without seeming controlling. By pacing revelations across decades instead of delivering them all at once, Dolly preserved curiosity around her life while maintaining authority over its meaning, ensuring that her story unfolded on her terms rather than being mined for sensationalism. Behind the public persona exists a tightly held inner circle composed of family members, longtime collaborators, and trusted friends who have remained constants through fame's fluctuations, people who describe Dolly not as larger than life but intensely present, attentive, and loyal. Those closest to her often note that her generosity extends inward as much as outward, expressed through quiet acts rather than public gestures, and that she values continuity above novelty, keeping relationships that predate success and grounding herself in familiarity. This inner circle acts as both support system and reality check, providing honesty unfiltered by adoration, and their continued presence across decades suggests that Dolly's warmth is not performance but practice, reinforced daily in private interactions that never reach headlines but sustain her resilience. No career as long and visible as Dolly Parton's is free from crisis, and hers has included professional setbacks, creative doubts, public misinterpretations, and personal losses that could have derailed a less centered figure. Yet what distinguishes her responses is not dramatic comeback narratives but steady recalibration. When faced with disappointment, she rarely rushed to correct perception, choosing instead to redirect energy into work, reflection, or service, trusting that momentum built through consistency would outlast temporary disruption, and this approach allowed her to absorb shocks without internalizing them as identity. Resilience for Dolly was never about proving strength to others but about preserving alignment with her values, an internal compass that guided her through uncertainty and prepared her for later decisions that would require the same calm resolve under far greater scrutiny. When Dolly Parton speaks about endings, she does not frame them as conclusions but as boundaries, moments where intention replaces momentum and choice replaces habit, because for someone who has spent a lifetime saying yes to possibility, deciding where to stop becomes the final act of authorship. The word end has followed her in headlines and speculation, often misunderstood as disappearance or withdrawal. Yet in her own language it has always meant refinement, choosing which parts of her public life continue and which are allowed to rest. And this distinction matters, because Dolly has never equated relevance with visibility, believing instead that purpose sharpens when energy is conserved rather than scattered. As she assessed her legacy, she spoke more frequently about sustainability, about ensuring that the work she loved did not become a burden to her health, her joy, or the people she loved, and about the responsibility of leaving things whole rather than exhausted, a mindset shaped by decades of watching others burn out chasing applause that fades faster than fulfillment. And so the end she contemplated was not a dramatic exit but a quiet narrowing of focus, a conscious decision to protect what remained precious by honoring limits she once could afford to ignore. In the final measure of Dolly Parton's story, what endures most clearly is not a single song, business, or institution, but a framework she built for others to step into, one rooted in ownership, generosity, and creative courage, because she never sought heirs in the traditional sense, preferring instead to cultivate systems that could thrive without her constant presence. The artists she inspired, the communities she invested in, the children who learned to read through her programs, and the collaborators who learned how to balance kindness with strength all carry forward pieces of her philosophy, extending her influence in ways no farewell performance ever could. And as the spotlight softens and her appearances become more selective, the networks she built continue to operate, quietly and effectively, doing exactly what she intended them to do. If there is a revelation at the heart of her long journey, it is that knowing when to let go can be as powerful as knowing how to begin. And that a life fully lived does not demand endless continuation, only a final deliberate act of care, for the work, for the people, and for oneself, that allows the story to end not in silence, but in echo.